Yeah, because I like to send them to you guys, and then I'll send them to the office. So for the other realtors who weren't able to make it and whatnot, so that way. But you guys you're in person, so you get to ask questions and whatnot. But so my name is Justin Stivers. I am an attorney. I own a law firm called the Probate Law Firm. We're based out of downtown Miami. Like I was saying earlier, next month we're moving to Brickell. But we handle probates pretty much statewide as of right now. I think we're in about 17 different counties throughout the state. So that's all we do. Don't do title, don't do closings, strictly probate. And so kind of, I put together this course that I've been doing for about 7 months now to different brokerages, and I think, and Melanie's here so she can attest, probate is a growing area. It's a great little niche. Maybe you don't want to let people know so you don't have as much competition, but it's a great little niche, and I think being in Florida, especially South Florida, we're seeing a lot more of it. It's obviously an aging population here, so chances are in your time as a realtor, you're going to come across probate. And it's okay if you don't even know what probate is yet. We're going to define it. But so basically, the point of this presentation, with the smallest group, probably only going to be about 30 minutes. The presentation itself, and then Q&A. Happy to answer any questions you guys have. But basically, I want to just give you enough information so that you can identify a property that's going to go through probate or that might need to go through probate. So that way, you kind of have a heads up, so that when you go into the listing presentation, and that's kind of the second point of this my presentation, is that when you go to the listing presentation, you have just enough knowledge. I don't, if you're an attorney, maybe you can give legal advice, but if you're not an attorney, I wouldn't advise you give legal advice about probate, but at least you'll be able to speak with the person and really stand out from a lot of your competition who doesn't even know what probate is. And this way you can answer some basic questions. How long does it take? Maybe how much does it cost? Certain things, kind of just basic things. And then last, I'll try to give you just some kind of quick tips about how to market for probate listings, because at the end of the day, that's what you guys want, how to get listings. So like I said, 30, 45 minutes, more or less with the group this size. But what I like to do, just to kind of have an idea of who is in the room, maybe we'll go around the room, just say, your name, how long you've been a realtor, and if you've had any experience with a property in probate, and then what that experience was like, good, bad, and whatnot. So, start with you.
My name is Melanie Heyer. I've been a realtor for 16 years. I'm a founding agent of this office. I actually decided in 2006 to focus my business on probate. That's how I know Justin already. So I would say about 70% of my business is probate.
Wow. Okay, cool.
My name is Frank Concepcion.
And I don't have a whole lot of experience with probate. I work in mortgage. Occasionally I have, we're buying a property, but usually it's already done and dealt with at that point. Very rarely are we in the middle of anything, so I want to learn about any case situation like that.
How long do you say you've been a realtor? Did you say?
Well,
you're mortgage. You're just mortgage. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, about 7 years now.
Sure. Okay.
I'm Myra Martinez. Just started in real estate. Have maybe 3 or 4 other careers within my lifespan, and no experience of probate. This experience of actually doing wills and testaments from personal family matters, and sounds interesting.
Sure. Okay. Sure.
My name is Zed. 16 hours in the real estate business.
Really? You just got, wow, congrats, welcome. Awesome.
4 months in Florida, 14 years in Dubai, real estate development, architecture design. So I did A to Z projects for my companies. Due
Okay.
to the recession there, I came here to a predicted recession. I hope not. Coming from, I went to Duke University, have a family of lawyers, all lawyers, so I relate to you. I think it's important, this class is important, and I'm excited to be part of AW.
Okay, great, welcome.
Yeah, Joel Nunez. I've been in the business for almost 14 years now. New to Florida, but yeah, I've dealt with probate. Can be hell.
Okay.
I had a short sale one time in New York. This is not too long ago, and the person that we were doing the sale with died in the middle of everything, and you know how this
Yeah.
goes. Basically, go to court, and their heirs have to sign off on everything, and little did
Yeah.
we know that he had 16 children all over the country. We have to
Yeah.
get all of them to sign off.
Yeah, that happens a lot in Florida with
I don't know if the law is different from here in New York or.
Yeah, well, that happens a lot. I was gonna say it happens a lot in Florida because a lot of people move from other countries, or they're maybe living here part time, had a property here, and then you've got to find all of the people in other properties. These are actually 3 different ones.
Melanie, would you grab 2 of the ones on the left?
Sure.
Yeah. So you're coming from New York. You were coming from North Carolina. You said
I studied North Carolina, but I come from Dubai.
Dubai. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yes, sir.
Antonio Ferrero. I've been doing real estate for about a year, mainly rentals.
Okay.
Coming from Boston, so East Coast guy. That's it.
Nice. Never dealt with probate. Mostly
No.
rentals. Okay.
Hopefully one day. Well,
Yeah.
not hopefully, but
Well,
I need to
yeah.
deal.
Jerry Rosen, I've been a realtor for 16 years,
Okay.
and really never, I guess I really never dealt with probate. If
Sure.
it was handled with the lawyers or whoever did the closings.
Right.
But just interested.
Okay. Cool. And ma'am in the back? Name, how long you've been a realtor, and if you've ever dealt with probate. Are you a lawyer? Because that's like a very lawyerly
Both.
period. Okay, yeah.
I'm a recovering attorney.
Okay.
I've been a full-time realtor for 4 years. My name's Whitey Rosen.
Okay.
And I've been with KW my entire real estate career.
Okay, great.
No relation.
Gotcha. And are you still practicing attorney, or?
Not if I can help it.
Okay, fair enough. Any probate experience, or?
Only personal, not
Gotcha.
legal.
Okay.
Yeah, quick question, are the probate laws different state to state, or?
Yeah, state to state, they're different, yeah. Okay, so I had 4 handouts. Does everyone have all 4? Okay, so we'll start with, so we got kind of a mixed group, some very experienced, some people with very experienced probate, and just general probate experience. 16 years, I think, was the longest anyone's been a realtor, which is a feat in and of itself, and then brand spanking new. So we got a good mix here. So let's start with, I guess, just define a couple of the key terms, and we'll start with what probate is. So the way I kind of explain probate and what it is it involves courts, it involves a judge, it involves attorneys, and it's a legal process. It basically takes something that someone owned when they were alive, now they've passed away, and so now you're taking their assets, in this case a house, and putting it in the name of their beneficiaries. Usually, maybe a spouse, maybe their children, if they had a will, if they were leaving it to someone specific. So the way to think about probate is just when you hear the word probate, you're going to think legal process. You're going to think there's a court involved, and you're taking what someone had when they were alive, and now you're transferring it and getting it to their beneficiaries. Decedent, another common word that we use. That just means someone who's passed away, someone who's died. It's a common word that you'll hear in probate. Estate, again, another common word. Estate is just the way I think about it. It's everything that someone owned. Now that they're passed away, you refer to it as their estate. So John's alive. He owned his, he had a house, he had a car, he had jewelry, whatever. That was John's. Now that John has died, all of that stuff is owned by his estate. So when we refer to an estate, it just means everything that they had. I know it's a little complicated, but yeah, okay. Last will and testament. You guys are probably somewhat familiar with this. A last will and testament is a document. There are some requirements, but it's just basically, you could write on a piece of paper, have witnesses say, I want to leave my house to my brother, and that's a last will and testament. It just basically says what you want to happen with your stuff after you pass away. And then the last term, which you'll definitely use if you have any probate properties, probate listings or whatnot, is personal representative. And I think coming from New York, I think they use the word executor in New York, but they mean the same thing. So sometimes you'll hear personal representative, sometimes you'll hear the word executor, they mean the same thing. And this is the person that, and we'll talk about it here in a second, but this is the person that if you're representing the seller, you're gonna be working very closely with, they're the personal representative. So the person who is able to sell the property is the personal representative. They're the ones who are gonna be signing closing documents, they're the ones who are going to be working with me or working with the attorney. It's basically, it's kind of like the power of attorney when the person was alive. But the personal representative / executor, that's the person that you guys will be working with. So, blank faces, any questions or, okay. I was gonna say it gets a lot more exciting, but it doesn't get too much more exciting.
Use that thing? Like that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
All right, so when you guys so when someone calls you and they say, hey, I've got a friend, they want to sell their property, what's maybe the first thing that you all do?
Check the tax roll.
Check the tax roll. Yeah, exactly. Go to the property appraiser's website, and that's what I think you should be doing if you're not doing it. But now we're going to shift to kind of talking about when is probate necessary, and this is probably the easiest way, one of the easiest ways to find out if probate is in fact necessary. So you all should have 3 handouts. So the first one I wanted you all to look at, the owner, it shows Maria Pichardo, EST of. The property address is 11309 Southwest 200th Street. Has everyone, well, maybe not use that because you're brand new, but has everyone looked at a property appraiser, printout before, or first time you're looking at it? Okay, so this is where when you're maybe getting a listing, or I would even encourage you when you're doing a rental, look at this just to make sure you want to identify who the owner is. So when you're trying to find out if a property needs to go through probate, here's one where probate is very, very necessary. You can identify that it's necessary. So you'll see here, under the owner, it says Maria Pichardo, EST of. So what that means is estate of. And before we talked about what an estate is, in this case, Maria had passed away. So if you see this on a property appraiser's website, chances are, not 100%, but chances are this is going to have to go through probate before you would be able to sell the property. So when a property is owned by an estate, the property can't be sold until you transfer title into the beneficiaries. So if you're looking and someone's, let's just say the daughter of Maria calls you and you look at this property and the daughter says, yeah, but I'm her only daughter, I get the property, let's just sell it. And you see this, you see estate of, you can't sell that property yet. It's gonna have to go through the courts, title is gonna have to be put in the daughter's name before you can sell the property.
How long does that take?
Yeah, we'll get to that in a second.
Depends on your attorney.
Yeah, it depends on a lot of factors, but yeah, we'll talk about that.
So when it comes down to estates,
It seems to me like, basically when somebody dies, their right to that property doesn't die with them, right?
The right to the property.
Their rights to that property don't die with them, and that's what the estate is. It's kind of like, all right, this belonged to this person, they're not around anymore to say who it'll go to, so now we gotta figure out who's gonna go.
Automatically belongs to the state.
It kind of dies with them because they're still the owner.
They don't exist.
Yeah, so they're still technically the
oh,
owner.
I guess, okay, well, that's another way of saying it, but that's what I meant. Yeah, it kind of, they
It
don't
depends.
lose their ownership just because they died, and that's why we have this thing of the estate.
Yeah, and
And that's why it can't be sold, because they're not around to say who's
Right.
gonna get it.
Exactly. Yeah, they can't sign off on any of the documents. So basically, I think that's a good way of looking at it.
It's kind of like, it's still in their name, but
Property
they're not
kinda
around to
dies
sign the documents, so.
Yeah, and we'll talk about ways where where just because someone dies, you don't always have to do probate for their property, and we'll get into some of the exceptions. But this is
Is this the way it was set up from the beginning? I mean, this is the tax law, so they probably bought it on name?
no.
No, the government figured out that they're dead.
Yeah, so this was
They don't always do that.
Yeah, so this property was originally owned by Maria, okay? When she bought it in, I don't know if it will show on here, but 2007, okay? I'm assuming she bought the property in 2007. The owner at that time would have just said Maria Pichardo, okay? But what happens is And there's really no rhyme or reason to it, but when the person passes away, sometimes the county will get notified that the person has passed away, and when they learn of that, they change the name of the owner, and they change it to estate of.
So like if they send the tax bill to the person and it gets returned to the county, they, you know,
Yeah.
figure out maybe that the person died and change it.
Yeah, there's really, I've called different, the government organization that's called Vital Statistics, they're the ones who record the death certificate, and they've told me that they send them to the county, and sometimes the county will record them. I think sometimes people, like her daughter, I know for a fact, because this is one we did, she notified the county, because a lot of times they want, the children want to continue with the homestead exemption, right? So they want to get the property put in their name, and they'll call the county and say, hey, listen, my mom died, we want to get, and the person on the other side, they just stop listening, they say, oh, your mom's dead, well now it's owned by the estate, and they'll update it right then. So I always tell clients, like, maybe don't notify the county or even your mortgage lender that that the person has passed away. All right, so when you're just investigating and you have, you know, if someone tells you, hey, my friend's mom died, they want to sell their property, you can probably start thinking probate. But if someone just tells you, hey, I've got a property listing, and you go on there, or you've got a property they want to sell, and you go on there and you see this, you see this EST, which stands for estate of, then you know it's going to be a probate. So this is probably the most common way. The second one that you'll see sometimes, if we look at property address 1821 Northwest 33rd Street, owners Jesus Silva, EST of Mida Silva. So this is, again, pretty common, and so this was an interesting one. So this actually has two owners. The first owner is Jesus Silva, which you see EST of, which that means he's died, right? We just talked about that. And then you see a second person named Mida Silva. So what happened on this one, Jesus is the father, Mida is the daughter. They own the property, and we won't get too far into, you know, the weeds about title and how they owned it, but they just owned it 50-50, okay? They owned it 50-50. Mida was the only daughter. Jesus died. Now 50% of the property was owned by his estate. Mida thought, well, I'm his only daughter, I'm on title, so I should be able to sell the property. She gets a realtor, they go to sell the property, the title company comes back and says, no, you can't sell this property because you've got to do a probate for your dad. And so that happens a lot here, especially in Miami, where brothers and sisters buy a piece of property and they don't have the title set up correctly. And again, I'll talk about different types of title here in a second, but they don't set up the title correctly, so they were just 50-50 owners. And so when the dad passed away, the property just became a part of his estate, and Mida only owned 50% of the property. So you can't sell 50% of a property. So before she could sell it, she hired us, we did the probate, we put the property in her name, and she was able to sell it. But they wasted a lot of time. They wasted 5 or 6 months marketing the property until it ultimately went to the title company. Yes, sir.
This goes back to his question. How soon can you finish probate?
I'm gonna get to length in a second. Yeah.
The reason why is because in
Yeah,
New York, everything is prolonged. Forget about it.
Yeah, sure.
But you don't have to finish probate to sell the property. That's another option. You can sell the property while it's in probate.
Yeah.
And just exchange the money.
The money goes to the court restricted account, bank account, until the probate finishes, and then the heirs get their settlement.
Yeah, and well,
Okay. Well,
yeah, like
So the
we're like
property can be sold.
we're like 5 minutes away, and then we'll get to the length of time. But yeah, the only reason this actually got sold very quickly. We sold this. I mean, this was sold very quickly. What took a while, to her mistake, really to the realtor's mistake, because had she looked at this, she would have seen this and could have known, wait, there's an issue we got, or maybe done a title search in the very beginning, but they didn't do any of that. And so they were basically at closing table, and the title company was like, no, you can't close, you gotta do a probate for this one. So this is common. So when you see this, and a lot of times the thing is, you know, it makes logical sense. Mida, the mom had passed away before the dad, she's the only daughter, they own the property together. Logically, you would think, she thought, I get the property, I can just sell it. But, you know, they didn't own the property the way they should have owned it so that she would have
in real estate,
inherited
we
it.
talk about tenants in common,
Okay,
right?
yeah, so that's, yeah.
Tenants in common is how they were instead
Exactly.
of joint survivorship.
Yeah, so that's a good segue into the next one, to the last one, and we'll talk about how they could have avoided it, how they could have avoided having this. So the last one, well, I'll just say that, yeah, so there's the way, and again, this is maybe a little, not necessarily within the scope, but there's a way that you can own property with another person and it avoids probate. So if you own the property, if Maida and Jesus had owned the property and after their names, it would have said owners as joint tenants with right of survivorship.
Becomes automatic then.
You guys familiar with that
Yeah.
phrase at all? Then it would have automatically passed to that person and they wouldn't have had to do this. But they just owned it as what Melanie said, as tenants in common. And so they had, it didn't automatically, it basically stopped with them and it didn't transfer. So one thing, when you're doing the closing and your real estate attorney or title company, whoever is doing the closing, you wanna have that conversation with your buyers, your sellers, well, your buyers really, how do you wanna own this property? And if it's brother and sister and they're both saying, I want my sister to have my half when I die, and she said, I want my brother to have my half when I die, then you wanna put that language, joint tenants, right of survivorship.
It's just a little pro tip on that though, because I know that some of the agents in the room are also new.
Sure.
And tell me if you feel the same way, I wouldn't
Advise
advise
the buyers on which one to take, point them to the title company and just make sure they have that conversation. with the
Yeah,
seller.
absolutely. And that's, I don't wanna go too far in the weeds in that anyways,
Yeah.
but yeah,
A lot of
You
agents,
shouldn't give that
a lot of
advice.
agents speak to that, and then God forbid they actually do it, they end up in a situation
Yeah.
they like, and guess what, you're the one that advised them.
Yeah.
I don't wanna pull you into the weeds,
Sure.
but
Yeah.
there's other options too, by putting into a trust or some type of an entity, and it's just important to be aware that there are options, and get, like Frank said,
Yeah.
to tell them to speak to their accountant
yeah.
or their attorney or title company about what vehicle's best for them.
Yeah, and that's a great segue because the last one that we have is the property address 13926 Southwest 161 Court. And so you'll see on here, Karen Rodman, TRS. So what that stands for is trust. And so a trust is very different from a will. A trust, if you put the property into a trust, it's going to avoid probate. Okay, so it's kind of an advanced topic, but if someone is looking, if they're maybe not even sophisticated, I think it's a great idea, and they're able to, each mortgage company has specific requirements as to whether you can put the property into a trust if there's a mortgage or whatnot, but assuming you can do it, it's a great way to avoid probate. So in this case, Karen, when she passes away, her property will not go through probate. And so there's really a few ways to avoid probate. A trust is becoming more and more popular, more and more common. Again, you guys probably shouldn't do it. You want to have an estate planning attorney draft those documents. And then the deed, the joint tenants with right of survivorship, is another way to avoid probate. So that's
How about LLCs, people set up these companies with LLCs, what's the deal with that?
also a little more complicated. Behind the LLC, you're probably going to have documents that say what happens with the property. A lot of times people will run into problems because they don't have those documents that says what will happen with the property, and they just create their own LLC. So there's kind of some issues with that. I don't know, have you had issues with that or?
Most of the properties that I've run into, and I don't think I've dealt with probates that are in LLCs.
Yeah, it's not very common, because usually when you have that, you have a company that owns it, and the company is gonna have bylaws and a succession plan.
Too much maintenance.
So
Yeah, it's a lot
here
of
in Miami
maintenance, yeah.
Beach, we deal with a lot with LLCs and Brickell because it's foreign buyers.
Right.
Or it's real estate investors.
Yeah.
So, those types of people tend to have estate planning behind it.
Yeah.
All my foreign clients, they have the local LLC that's owned by an offshore LLC
Right.
to, escape the probate of the United States.
Yeah, that's,
For just, maybe off topic, but if a person currently has the property in their own name and they want they didn't think about it, let's say, when they acquired it, and they want to put it into a trust or LLC, how do they avoid the county redoing the tax? How do they avoid losing their tax, their whatever basis in the property?
most of the time they won't, if they're not, and that's a little tricky, yeah.
Well, they call it 1680 LLC, so if they don't know that it's Jane Doe's house,
Yeah,
the county will automatically reassess it for tax purposes. But it's really still Jane Doe's house.
LLC, correct, but if it's a trust, then.
yeah, if it's a
you know.
trust, then
They may recognize the name and not.
Right.
But if it's an LLC, is there a way to indicate to the county that it's still the same person, they just put it into an entity?
I don't know.
I don't think LLC's gonna
Yeah.
be homestead.
Yeah, I don't think you can get the homestead with an LLC. Yeah. I'm gonna table that.
Okay.
Cause I'm not entirely sure, but I don't, yeah, it's a little more advanced than
Okay.
probate 101. So, alright, so that's how to kind of that's more or less how to identify, when it's going through. Any questions about that? Just kind of, this is just specifically when you're spotting it, so that, going to now the second point, you can go into this listing presentation and be more knowledgeable than a lot of the other realtors, right?
So this is accessible online
Yep,
without any membership or
yep,
whatever, right?
that's free, yep.
Okay.
So if you have a last will and testament, it still goes through probate.
Yeah,
But if you change it to trust, then it doesn't, even if you
That's
didn't
correct.
have.
yeah.
Or you can have both and have a layer. Can you have a layer? Like
Most
if you have a
people-
will and testament, can you still go and do this?
Yeah, most people have both. You know, again, not going off too, I mean, we'll talk a little bit about the will, but wills are not that useful and end up being a lot more problematic in probate because, you know, now a trust is more complicated because you have to, you know, do a new deed. If you have to do a new deed, put the property, you know, get the deed recorded, and most people aren't gonna do that. Most people don't, you know how to do that. But with a will, you can go to plenty of online websites, download, you could go to Office Depot and buy, and they do these handwritten wills or they type it up and they end up kind of being problematic. But I guess the main thing that I want you to get away from that, the difference between it, is a will does not avoid probate. And so now when you're going to the listing presentation, there's essentially, that's one of the first questions I want you to ask them, or I would encourage you to ask, is did the person have a last will and testament? And if they say yes, ask if you can get a copy of it, or if they can get a copy of it. Because a lot of times, I've seen this where, you know, and, you know, let's just say brothers are living together, one of the brothers has been really sick, but the brother who just died had children, but the children live in California, didn't have any relationship with the father, they moved out a long time ago. Well, by law, they're gonna be entitled to inherit something, right? But if the brother says, yeah, but you know, my brother John, he had a last will and testament, or he had a will, he said he was gonna leave everything to me, and you say, okay, great, do you have it? You know, I don't know, he put it somewhere. You're probably talking with the wrong person. And the reason we wanna figure out what's important to you to make sure that you're speaking with the person who's going to be the personal representative, because only that person can sell the property. If you're speaking with, you know, a distant cousin who has no rights, no interest in the property, you're kind of wasting your time. So if they ask if they have a last will and testament, because you might be speaking with someone and then we get a copy of the will and the person you spoke with doesn't have it, you know, they're a long distance cousin, you're kind of wasting your time speaking with that person. So first question is, you know, did they have a will? And if they say yes, can you get a copy of it? Again, your job is not to, and I would encourage you not to, don't read the will and dissect it as to this is a valid will, there's, you know, 2 signatures, all, you know, just ask that so that when if there's not an attorney involved, when you get an attorney involved, you can kind of fill him or her in on that. The second question I would encourage you to ask is, what was your relationship to the person who passed away? And again, this goes to, are you speaking with a person who actually is going to be able to sell this property? And remember, again, I'm saying it repeatedly, only the personal representative can sell the property. And the personal representative usually is a family member. It's usually the closest living family member. So it's usually